Um, so we are going to talk tonight about sports. And in sports, we know that there's lots of racism, sexism, and activism, which is a good one out of the three. I'd like you all to just kind of introduce yourselves a little bit and maybe talk about either why you're passionate about sports, maybe an experience you've had in one of these categories, something along those lines, and just kind of, maybe let the people in the audience get a little bit familiar with you. We're going to start because Todd is up to my left. We'll go Todd, Dr. Edney, Dominique, and Larry. So
Thank you, Becca, for having me on. I really feel honored to be part of the group here tonight. And of course, sports for me was an outlet. I always tell the story. If it wasn't for sports, I probably would have went in a different direction. Of course, got a full scholarship to the University of Pittsburgh. Really could have went anywhere. And I tell the story. I graduated with a 2.0 GPA, scored 720 SATs. By most standards, I should not even be in college. I shouldn't be where I am today. But if it wasn't for sports, had the opportunity to really go anywhere in the country to play football. I chose Pitt from Pittsburgh, and so decided to stay in my hometown. Have epilepsy, which I had a seizure my sophomore year at Pitt, which ended my career, and had to go to Plan B, which was to graduate. And so I think I graduated in 4 years, went on to pursue my master's, and of course, worked in education for 20-some years, helping turn schools around. But I was one of those kids that if it wasn't for sports, I don't know where I would be today, because it was the outlet. School wasn't what I wanted to do really, but football was something that I loved and was passionate about. And I think that for me, life is like sports. I think for those of you who have played sports, you deal with adversity all the time. And I think at a very early age, I had to deal with not being able to play football at a very early age and take something taken away from me that I love to do. So I had to pivot very early, and that's what life is about. So I think sports kind of allows you to learn about life, and if you're able to participate in any kind of sports, high school, college, professional, it really is about life. So that's my story on sports.
thank you, Todd. Dr. Edney?
Right. So I guess I started running, and I realized I was fast when I was younger, beating boys in the neighborhood. So I knew when I got to high school, I wanted to run track. I didn't even know what that meant, but I knew I was going to run track. So I went to a high school in Philadelphia Archdiocese, Bishop Conwell, an all-girls Catholic school, and ended up running track. Played a little basketball, loved both sports, but started to get a little bit better in track and figured it might be the ticket to kind of get me where I needed to be. And I was lucky enough to have been successful in it in high school, went on to the University of Delaware, which brought me to Delaware, and ran track for the University of Delaware for the years I was there, was captain of the team, that kind of a thing. And really just, I think the thing with sports, it really helped develop me as a leader. And so it kind of helped me to reach out for other leadership positions as I was kind of going along. I did coach track and field for many years in the state, a high school track and field coach, and I really enjoyed it, loved working with the athletes, giving a little bit of that back that I got, and wanted to make sure they had the same kinds of good experiences while being on the team. And then as I moved into administration, you can't coach because you have no life. So you end up trying to still stay around the sport. So I became a member of the Delaware State Track and Field Committee. So I officiate at meets. I still kind of stay around it in that way. And then eventually was honored enough to be able to be on the Interscholastic Sports Association at the state level, and have been on that board for the past 6 years. And I guess kind of coming up, the big thing that I saw, didn't realize it right away, but kind of as I got older, I started to really see the disparaging things, but the disparities between like the recognition of girls and women in sports. And so that was kind of a little niche I wanted to jump into. So I became a member of the Delaware Women's Alliance for Sport and Fitness, whose sole purpose is to recognize girls and women in sports, and eventually became the board president, which I still hold to this day. And our goal is really just to recognize women and girls in sports. So we hold luncheons every year and honor women in different categories each year. And we honor high school athletes, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th graders all around, to make sure that we just, give them their due. They're doing great things in the state. And so that's kind of one thing that I've done to kind of promote women and girls in sports.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Dominique?
Hi, everybody. So I am along the lines of the reason why I got into sport and the reason why I got into coaching was to give back. So when I was in middle school, I was between soccer or field hockey, and I didn't really understand the sport of field hockey. So my coach just said, you're fast, just we'll figure it out from there. If you have speed, we'll put a stick in your hand and you'll figure it out from there. So I played field hockey all throughout middle school, all throughout high school. At the high school level, I was a member of the lacrosse team. I was a member of the soccer team, ran indoor and outdoor track. Got an opportunity to go to Penn Relays, which really opened my eyes to the track world, which was amazing. So going off to college, I was getting recruited for track and field hockey. So I had to make a decision on what I really wanted to do. And I decided to go on to field hockey. So I went on to college at East Stroudsburg University, played 4 years, and then decided to get my graduate degree and continued to play. And I got the opportunity of coaching at the high school level and coached at the college level at Washington and Jefferson, and then worked at Washington and Lee. And the fact that I played at the college level, I always had an interest on studying abroad. So I never got the chance to study abroad. So after coaching at Washington and Lee, I actually applied for a program. It's called United Through Sport USA South Africa, or United Through Sport South Africa. So I was supposed to be in South Africa for 3 months, and I actually ended up staying for 2 years. So I lived in South Africa for 2 years. I was a volunteer, and then I ran the volunteer program, and I played for a South African club over there. And what was eye-opening for me, because mostly field hockey is mostly white in America, and over there it was 100% switch, and mostly men. So that was interesting for me to do. So I over there, we coached a lot of different sports. We did rugby, netball, cricket, hockey, tennis, and soccer. So a lot of those sports were not American sports. Cricket is an awesome sport. Rugby is an awesome sport too. Wish we can incorporate that here in America, because both of those sports are just powerful sports. But I got an opportunity. I worked in the Nelson Mandela Bay area, and we delivered life skills and sport because there is not physical education on the national curriculum in South Africa. So we worked with about 15 schools a week, and we would go to a school and we would coach all those different sports, and all the coaches are coming from different countries, and we delivered sports and life skills. So I was over there for 2 years. I came back, and now my passion is kind of giving back to the community. I'm located in Sussex County. So my goal is to kind of give back, kind of pay it forward. The opportunities that, led me to get a scholarship, led me to coach at the collegiate level, that led me to play internationally and coach internationally. My goal is to kind of give back to the youth of our community here. So that's kind of my background with the sport. So if I say a lot of international things, I really had a passion of going over there. And what I always say is I went over there when I was 27, and I went over there one month after Nelson Mandela died, and he was in jail for 27 years. And I got to go to the country when I was 27. So that was kind of life-changing for me to get the opportunity of being in South Africa during that time. So yeah.
That's great. That's awesome. Larry?
Yeah, I love sports because particularly as a youth worker, I'm primarily a youth worker most of my life in the inner city, and the whole time I grew up old school family where the children are supposed to be seen and not heard. When the parents something, that doesn't mean that opens a discussion. That means, you do exactly what you're told, et cetera, et cetera. And I rebelled against that the whole time. And when I got away, when I came to Delaware to go to school, I started noticing inner city kids who didn't have that same structure. And so the same structure that I rebelled against, I really began to feel sorry for these children. Some of them, it didn't have that. So what happens with sports is sports becomes a structured environment that includes something that the children want to do. Now you can provide that ultimate structure and guidance that they need. Recently, I began to do some writing on mentoring, and one of the aspects I wanted to learn more about is when a player says, "I would run through a brick wall for Coach so and so." So the question is, why? Why would this person, this child, this young person, who's probably only with Coach so and so for about 3 or 4 years at the most, how did this person alter this now young adult's life forever? And it's through sports. It's that structure. It's through that discipline and through the love. You're able to show love through sports that makes the player, sure, if you're doing it right, it makes the player believe that that team is in fact their family, and they would do everything to support their family and not let their brother or sister down. So sports for me became very important. When I very early after a whole lot of discussion, I became a big brother. I resisted it, you know, and I became a big brother. My little brother was this quiet, shy boy, and I was single. I'm relatively quiet, you know, back then. So I'd sit in my apartment and there wouldn't be any sound. Nobody would be talking, you know, and I'm thinking, this is a mistake. This is not gonna work. And then one day I watched him ball up trash and throw it into the trash can. Repeatedly, throwing it in. So I said, "You want to learn how to play basketball?" He said, "Yes." Through that, I was able to, through basketball, I was able to help him. And he became, he remained kind of like an introvert, you know, all through school. But as an athlete, he was dominant. He was a dominant player. And he ended up, after college, he ended up playing for 1 year with the Washington Generals, the team that plays against the Harlem Globetrotters. So through sports, we can reach these children, particularly today. These children need something. They need guidance. They need structure. And sports is the ultimate avenue that we can use.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you all so much. And I think, Larry, to you and Todd's point is, when we talk about sports and youth, I will tell you that my son played both football and lacrosse. And my son is my stepson, so I can say he's brilliant. He's a doctor now.
Oh, wow.
But in that middle season, every year between the sports, we get calls from the teacher every single solitary year about his behavior. And it was because he didn't, Todd, like you said, he didn't have that outlet, right? Like that place to take all that physical energy while you're growing up and just put it someplace. And so grateful for sports, Todd, because I totally think without it, he would not be where he is now. And we had the same thing. Anytime we had an issue, we called the football coach, Larry. We were like, "Coach C, you got to come talk to Ryan because we don't know what to do." And right away, just like you said, I don't know about a brick wall, but he listened up. So, so that's great. We got some coaches on here. You guys know why you do that. These are all, we really could talk about this. That's such a nice topic, but we're going to talk a little bit about racism in sports, which is not such a great topic, but it definitely needs to be talked about, right? Give me. So in the NBA, there's been some talk about there being a plantation mentality. Do you agree with this? And if you don't have an opinion, don't worry about it. Why or why not? Some of the players said things like they feel like they're in a zoo and they're on display. And so if you have, if you follow NBA or you have some feelings about that, feel free. I'm going to start with Larry because I'm sure that he does. So go ahead and tell me how you feel about that, those comments.
I think it used to be, for sure. It used to be like that. Now it's getting better, where you see players exercising their authority, their leverage, you know, where they're saying, I don't want to play for this team anymore, or, you know, they manipulate their way to play where they want to play. Years ago in the NBA, a player would most likely be with that team, the same team forever. And now you see more of the players being able to use their leverage and use their talent to move around. And I don't totally agree with all that, but I do, to the point where the owners felt exactly that they own these players, and that they could do or say or whatever. And it wasn't necessarily the owners, but that the person that said shut up and dribble, you know, recently, when, you know, it's like, okay, you're going to be sorry for that. You know, you're going to pay for that, you know, because they felt as though we own you. You know, we pay you. We don't pay you to give your opinion. We pay you to dribble the basketball or to do whatever you're supposed to do. And that's changing. The climate of the country is changing, you know, and you know, in a really crazy way. We owe that to the insane president we just had, who brought all those racists and their tendencies out of the closet.
Yeah,
Black folks knew, have always known there has been crazy racist folks in this country, but we wouldn't get the attention, we wouldn't get the audience that we wanted. Nobody wanted to listen to us. Now they've come out of the closet. The arrogance and the ignorance have come out, both in sports and other places. And now you can see it front view. And now it gives an opportunity to deal with it. We're able to deal with it a little bit. I applaud the WNBA. They came out really strong. They were real influential in the election this past year. And they're really standing up. And what's so good about sports is, I'm sorry, take a little long. Sports, you know, what I've learned from an early age, it doesn't matter who's on your team, black, white, it doesn't matter. If you're on this team, most cases, you become brothers and sisters.
It's like military sometimes.
What's so encouraging is that you have, when black players now stand up to say something racially, you have their white brothers and sisters who are also standing up and who are also saying things. So that's great.
Yeah. So that's good. Anybody else follow the NBA and kind of have anything they want to share about those thoughts? You have other stuff to talk about.
I think for me, I think I'll utilize the NFL. I think that what did concern me when Colin, you know, of course, he did his stand, and I think I was really disappointed in not seeing many of the players support him. And I've always said this, is that I think, as Mr. Morris said, athletes have a platform. And that was the perfect time for many of the Black athletes, particularly football players, to say, you know what, we're going to take a stand and not play this week. And what would that have done to the NFL? Well, how would that have changed the dynamics? And I think I was really surprised not to see many more of the Black athletes support him. And, you know, and the question I've always asked is, you know, you put it out there, you know, this plantation mentality, and it really kind of bothered me, because I really thought that more athletes would have supported him. And he, you know, he really now is a change agent. I mean, he did something that most people are not willing to do, and sacrifice millions of dollars to be able to do something that was really for the social good. But, you know, so my hat's off to him, but I wish we would see more. And I think, as Mr. Morris said, you're seeing LeBron doing more things. You're seeing more people say, you know what, I'm gonna use my platform to speak up against racism. And you're seeing Patrick Mahomes do things like that. You're seeing more players. And I think that, as Mr. Morris said, that what happened, we saw all the injustices. People say, you know, I'm tired of this. And so I think that I would like to see more athletes really use that platform, because they're at a position politically and financially where they can make change in many communities, and people will follow them based off of what they do. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. They've even renamed, and I'm sorry because I don't remember the term, but they're no longer called owners of basketball. If one of you knows what the new term is, you can let me know. I just read it, but I can't recall what it is. So they're no longer called owners, the basketball team. I want to say they're called, Yeah, I read it in our stuff today, and I misplaced
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So okay, so Dominique or Dr. Edney, did you guys? And you don't have.
I was gonna say in terms of the WNBA and the WNBA and then the NBA, the whole, yeah, when the whole shut up and dribble came out, you know, a lot of them then said, forget this, I'm going to use my platform. And a lot of them, you know, did opt out of even playing in the season because of the climate that they were experiencing. And especially with the bubble mentality that they had, all, you know, the world kept moving and they were still in this bubble and they still had family and friends in the communities that were still dealing with the social injustice. So kind of my hats off to some of to the NBA players and the WNBA players. They're still, you know, we needed some kind of entertainment. We didn't have sports for the longest time.
Right.
And you know, they were in the bubble, they played through the bubble, and then it turned around and they played their season. They didn't even get that much time off. If the teams that made it to the final, they had to play quickly again. So we, you know, and I felt like because of exactly what we're all talking about with sports, we needed that. We needed that interaction. We needed to see them. And now there are fans in the stands, but you know, they had a lot of messages in their uniforms on the ground. You know, everything was branded, which is things that we really needed to see. And you know, making stadiums and making arenas places where people can vote, all of that was very powerful, and they got behind some of the powerful politicians. So definitely hats off to the ones that did decide to go back to a season, because they knew if they didn't go back, it was going to be a loss for their team, but they were passionate about being passionate within their communities. So I support kind of the movement that they were doing, and they were kind of the sports teams and that stood out and said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to be powerful about it, and we're not going to shut up. We're not going to shut up and dribble. We're actually going to be louder than possible, and we're just going to keep talking about it, and we're going to support it, and we're going to say that it's not right, and we're going to bring everybody together. And I believe that they are the reasons why we had a big voter turnout too, because they were definitely behind all of that.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess I would add to it, just, I mean, it started with the shut up and dribble. It moved to, you know, and Colin knelt and people just chastised him and it was horrible. And then the COVID hit and the world was on fire with George Floyd, and all the social injustices just came to a head, and something had to give. And I applaud the NBA because they got organized. They were so organized with all of their methods, from the bubble organization and creating a season to, we're going to have this cause on the shoe. And the shoe represents all of the money that's backing behind them. And really, they moved the dollar, the almighty dollar moved. And then all of the companies that support them were like, whoa, we're going to lose these athletes if we don't support them. And they're the ones who stepped up with them. You know, Nike came out with their commercial about Colin Kaepernick, changed the whole game. I mean, and then they didn't care what everyone thought. And then eventually it started moving from there. So I think they really, you know, they've got something going that, you know, you can use that status for such good things, and to bring awareness to this whole thing, and to move the money, move the dollar so that it's backing what they're doing. And that's really how you get out of that whole plantation mentality, because you flip the switch on the owners in that way.
Right, absolutely, because especially collectively, the power would be amazing if there was some type of walkout or anything like that, and it would have to be a collective, but it would really completely change the game. And I'm going to kind of Dominique, I'm glad you mentioned the WNBA, because I want to talk a little bit about them. I want to talk about a couple things. Well, one, you had mentioned how much activism you know, they did, and a lot of it was with their T-shirts, and there was a lot of fight back. You know, they had the Black Lives Matter T-shirts, and it was like, you can't wear these T-shirts, and then they wore them inside out, and then they, you know, tried to get their logo on there with the thing on there, and it was but they didn't give up. They were extremely persistent, and so what do you think about that like just the women together they were very organized about this, as opposed to you know, Colin Kaepernick, who kind of was on his own. He did have a couple players follow him, you know, to Todd's point. I mean, like in the men's sports, it really wasn't as as collected as a team as it was in the women's sport. Why do you think that was?
I think a powerful force, two women, powerful force, who, I don't know if they're married or if they're engaged, but Sue Bird is a powerful force, and then she is engaged or married to Megan Ramon, who is on the USA soccer team. So the two of them together are powerful in a sense of Megan's fighting for equal pay on the women's side, especially soccer. And then Sue Bird is very outspoken within her activism as well. So that trickle down effect on the younger women's front of just sports in general. I feel like it wasn't just women's basketball. WNBA was kind of the leader of it, but I think it's now trickling into other sports as well, especially tennis. It's trickling into different sports because they feel like they do have a voice and they're still fighting, and they feel, we can play, we can win at the international level, we can win at the professional level. Like, why can't we have a voice? We should be able to have a platform because we're playing just as hard. So yeah, that is the kind of the power couple when it comes to women's sports that I can think of that has been very powerful in the movement.
Right.
What is the sister's name who played WNBA and she took the year off to
Maya Moore.
No, not her. She took that was for criminal justice.
Right.
Oh, okay.
It might have been in Atlanta where she took it off. It's also social justice, and then one of the owners from that team began to make racist kinds of talks, and there got to be a movement, and this same player is joined with a group, and they bought the WNBA team from this racist woman, and now they own the team. You know that story?
No, but now we're gonna have to find out that story. So
absolutely.
Yes.
Do you know it? Do you know it?
I do, but I can't remember her name.
Yeah,
I don't remember her name, but I know
I
the
even
story.
think LeBron's involved in it too. They formed a group and they bought the team from this racist owner.
Yes. Yeah.
Just within the
I
last.
do know I saw something like LeBron just bought the Red Sox today.
He
So
bought the Red Sox.
You did?
Yeah.
I did. Yeah.
I
He
did
bought
see
the Red
that.
Sox
Yes.
in Boston.
He's an owner of them. Yeah.
The racist Boston.
Yes.
The racist Boston.
That's the
Okay.
most beautiful thing I've ever heard. The 21-day equity challenge, it literally started with talking about Boston and the racism in Boston, and how aren't they the first ones to have a Black player in the NBA, their team, right? But they're literally like the most, and I'm sorry for any Bostonites,
Okay.
just a reputation, I'm not stereotyping, but they're known to be a racist area. And
Yeah,
so it's interesting that he
Yeah, they're only they're only not racist. No, not all. Of course. They're only not racist when the teams are winning. Now, the story that you're referring to is Bill Russell.
Yes.
Bill
Tell me about him. Tell me about Bill Russell.
Carried their team. Bill Russell has more NBA championship rings than anybody ever. And so he was like the face of the Boston Celtics. But be sure when he would go to his home, they target his home, they burn crosses on his home lawn, they treated it, they treat him like one of those Negroes, And so yes, Boston was very racist.
Yeah, he had to drive. He actually stayed in New York every night. He drove 212 miles every day because he didn't feel safe in Boston.
Let me say this about back to the NBA. I think what is happening is that there's a shift that's happening because the term the plantation, in a plantation, if there's the categories of the house Negroes and the field Negroes. Yeah. And so if you worked in the house, you got treated a little better than the ones out in the field. But if you acted as though you had sympathy or agreed with or were friends with or whatever with the Negroes out in the field, the master would say, okay, that you're with them. Okay, you're going to be out there with them. If you're in here with us, you're not going to share their views, or you're not going to act like them, or you're not going to be, you want to be one of them, you be one of them. So it got to be a thing where the people in the house completely ignored the folks in the field.
Mhm.
And that spilled over to everything today. Even it's happening today. That's what Clarence Thomas is, I'm sorry, Supreme Court Justice.
All
But
right, Larry, you're
so
gonna
in
get me in trouble.
sports, the owners would say, okay, you want to be a social activist? We're gonna put you on waivers, or we're gonna trade you, or we're gonna cut you. And so the players began to feel like, I don't know if I'm gonna do this. And when Kaepernick came out and took the stand, there were players that were supportive of him, but still that was in the early stages of the independence that the players have are getting now. And they're thinking, we better not do that, because look what happened to color.
Mm-hmm.
We better be quiet, and so, but now it's like, they're not gonna do anything to us. What are they gonna do to us? Because everybody has demonstrated that teams are gonna support each other. There's a movement. If you try to single out one of these players, we're all gonna come to his aid. And so that's why it's getting better. The owners can no longer act like they're plantation bosses. Can't hear.
You're on
Her
mute.
dog.
You're on mute, Becca.
You're on mute.
You're on mute, Becca.
Yeah, because my dog's barking. I
Dog's
just saw this on
barking.
my comedy special last night. My dog's barking, the kid's running by. Sorry. He never does this. Yeah, so we talked a little bit about basketball. We talked a little bit about sports. And we talked about WNBA. What I was really curious about was there's this stigma or this question as to why the WNBA is not as popular, right, as the NBA, even though watching one of those games is amazing, right? And because these women are so socially active, and again, I'm not dismissing that some of the men are, but I think the women as collective are really, as a team, ready for it. So why do you guys have an opinion as to why you think perhaps the WNBA can't kind of break that barrier where not that they need to dominate, but they're just like, as far as soccer goes, right? Like the women have really kind of caught tail to men's soccer. Sometimes it's even a preference. But when it comes to basketball, that doesn't seem to be the case. Todd, you want to?
Well, I think a lot has to do with the money. I mean, men's basketball generates a lot. For example, in college sports, you look at football and basketball, they're money-making sports. I mean, sports is about making money. I mean, that's the reality of it. It's a business. And so when you look at the WNBA and you look at the NBA, I mean, it really comes down to the dollars.
Right.
What companies are going to sponsor who and do what. Now, you're starting to see more companies sponsor women's sports, I think, because they realize that there's a market for it as well. And so I think that, when you look at the dollars and cents, it really comes down to dollars and cents. And who can make the most money, because their goal is to make money.
Right.
So I think that's what you're seeing, but I think also, there has to be this change in tide in people's thinking, that women's sports are not as good as men's sports, and you can't think like that. I think that you still have an old guard where people believe that. I mean, I think there are still some men who probably still believe that, and people who believe that, so I think that really comes down to the dollars, but I think you'll start to really see more women's sports play that key role, but because the dollars are there to support it, but it really comes down to money.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Edney, do you have thoughts on?
I mean, he just really took the words out of my mouth. It's about the money. It really is, and I just, they have an incredible fan base. I don't think that's an issue.
Yes.
People love the sport. They'll watch it, and they'll come to the games, but it's just, it doesn't generate as much money as the male sports do. And they're just, they don't I don't know if it's they don't promote it as much. There's some of that I think that is going on as well. So I mean, really, it's just about that money. It's a shame, but it is.
Yeah. So is there an opportunity then for fans collectively to put money into that sport, to push it along? I think you guys are both right. So it's like but the audience is what puts the money in, right? So it's actually the fans that are holding them back, because you can buy a t-shirt, a WNBA t-shirt less than for an NBA t-shirt, right? So like, why are the fans not investing? Because it's a catch-22, right? Like, you need the money to get more attention, but you need more attention to get more money. So it's like a catch-22 there. So I just was curious as to like, why aren't the fans? Do you think there's still this stigma of, one of the articles I read talked about the women being tall, right? Tall and big, and they're not like the cute little soccer players. Like, that was one of the actual arguments, was that yeah. And this is like a woman who does research, but she said she wasn't saying it was right. She was saying that that's one of the things that people are not necessarily, because of that. And I was just like, okay, but the talent is pretty immense. But go ahead, Larry.
One of the things is that what the fans want to see is the flashy show stuff. It's not necessarily basketball. I've had the opportunity of coaching boys and girls. And believe me, the girls are more disciplined than the boys. Girls are easier to coach because you can get through to them, and they'll execute what you ask them to execute. The boys want to, they're ready to do this, and people are saying, yeah, look at him. Well, he didn't do anything. He didn't even run the play the way he's supposed to run the play. So it's the showmanship, all that flashy stuff. And the NBA, I was fortunate. One of the folks that I was able to coach when he was really little was Terrence Stansberry. And Terrence Stansberry grew up on the West Side. He went to Temple. He got drafted into the NBA. And then he went to Europe. He's in Europe now, and he's big time NBA. He's big time basketball over in Europe. So a couple of years ago during the NBA draft, I noticed that there were more than normal usual European players who were being drafted early. So I sent him a message. I said, Terrence, why do you think there are more Europeans? And he said, it's simple, that in America, the men are like one-on-one players. They do more by themselves. They don't, they're flashy. In Europe, they teach the team concept, and their fundamentals are better. And so what the public here, the NBA, professional, they get caught up in all that flashy stuff that the NBA players do, and the women don't necessarily do that. They're excellent players. Yeah. They're running plays. They're running really good. They're playing very well, but there's a whole lot of basketball fans that don't know anything about basketball. They just like flashy stuff.
Yeah. And so we touched a little bit on activism. A couple, I think Todd started a little bit. And, I think obviously everybody knows the name Colin Kaepernick, but he's not the only one, right? Like even earlier you were talking, oh my gosh, Dominique, about the woman for the WNBA.
Maya Moore.
I was talking about Maya Moore. She was talking about someone else, but yeah.
I was talking about Sue Bird.
Oh, Sue Bird.
Yes, Sue Bird, yeah. But Maya Moore, like I just learned about her during this 21-day equity challenge, right? But I have a picture of Colin Kaepernick on my wall right next to Rosa Parks, right? Because, and so I think there's definitely a bigger deal made out of men when they do these things, which is, again, it's the intersectionality of racism and sexism, I think, quite a bit. That happens here. And so I'm going to ask the ladies, as women, when you were playing sports, you're coaching sports, did you find that was harder to maneuver than maybe your male counterparts in their sports, whether it be your sons or your brothers or friends that were doing the same sports? Did you find that it was like that your challenges were a lot different? Either one of you.
Unfortunately, the sport that I played is not a male sport. We're the only country that doesn't see it as a male sport. Field hockey in the rest of the world is a male sport, not a female sport. So we're the only country that sees it really female. So I didn't really experience that at for field hockey specifically. I also played basketball and I also played softball. So I might have seen it more there, but I forget who said it on this panel that I really enjoyed playing with the boys, because I think the first your first game, it's kind of weird. They might not pass you the ball. It's kind of awkward. But then after that, you keep coming back and they want to keep pushing you harder and harder and harder. And then when you go out and you play and you're amongst other females, you're so much stronger and faster and mental. And I always say 90% of the game is mental, 10% is skill. So if you have your mentality going into those different spaces, regardless of a male female sport, you're more, it's a little bit better. But like I said, when I was in South Africa, it was the flip. There was a lot more males playing the sport of field hockey, and that was eye-opening for me. And a lot of times they were just running me over, and I was like, what is going on? I'm not really used to this force. But it made me, I mean, at that point I was a retired college athlete. I was still trying to live my dream. So, but I still learned a lot from how they saw the game and how they kind of navigated the game a little bit. So I think it didn't really happen at a younger age, but it happened more of just learning lessons from playing sports with boys and just being pushed and being told that you can play with us. Keep playing hard. We're going to support you. You can definitely play with us. So yeah.
And that may be a little bit generational too. I'm not 100% sure there, but how about you, Dr. Edney? How did you feel like just in comparison?
I mean, track and field, it's just, who's the fastest and it could be a male, it could be a female. Growing up in high school, I mean, I went to an all girls Catholic school, so I didn't have any boys around to even be compared to in that way. I mean, we did have a brother school, but we were 5 miles away from them, so we really didn't see them as much on the track. But when I got to college, I mean, I think one of the things I really enjoyed about running at the University of Delaware is that we ran with the guys, like we ran as like the sprinting squad ran together, the distance runners ran together. So, and our coaches, I mean, I could just say Jim Fisher was just as much my coach as Sue McGrath Powell was my coach, even though she was she was the female coach and he was the men's coach. And we ran together. We did practices together, and it made us stronger to run with them because you were trying to always keep up. So I didn't see that as much as kind of when I was going in the college realm as well. Yeah,
that's awesome. That's really good to hear, is that that the challenge was there. And so we're going to talk a little bit about something that this might lead to. So there's this thing, and we're going to talk about it not in the transgender aspect this evening. We're talking about sex testing, right? When you're just testing simply athletes to see how much testosterone they have, and kind of playing that against each other. How do you see that? I mean, how does that look in your opinion? I mean, I could give you mine, but I'd rather listen to you guys. Anyone? If you don't know what we're talking about, it's okay.
I do.
I heard. Oh, you can go. I heard it on NPR, so you can go. Sorry.
I mean, it's just hard because they just keep moving the needle. I mean, early on it was, you got to have this chromosome or that chromosome. And then it moved to, testosterone level. I mean, they just keep changing the needle to fit whoever it is that's out there that they don't want running or that they don't want participating in sports. If Michael Phelps was running track, it might be a whole other thing. He's built completely to run, to swim. His feet are this big, they're flippers, his arms are like, my goodness, he's built to be there. Would he be the same if he was on a track? Who cares if he was on a track? Go ahead and run. But like, if if you've got a female who's running and they've got more testosterone levels, you know, who's to say they can't participate in the sports just because you believe that that person may not be pretty enough, or that they don't look like the ideal woman who should be running, you know? And so we're going to look at those testosterone levels and we're going to make that be the mark now. Oh, it's too high. We're going to, you know, move it over there. So they just keep changing the test and moving the needle around to fit whatever it is that they're trying to discriminate against at that moment.
I love that. I love that. That's exactly right. They're moving the needle to make it more to whatever narrative they want to write in that moment. So,
Well,
Larry?
also there's some racism involved in that too, because some of the sisters that are great athletes, they're strong, they're strong looking, they're athletic looking, and because the other folks don't look like that, you want to say you want to make you're trying to make it even for the others. And so you think, well, she can't really be that strong without anything different, you know. It's impossible for her to be like that. So there must be another reason, you know. And so they come up with all kinds of stuff. I mean, you know, so that I think that's part of it too.
Oh, it's definitely part of it. It's definitely part of it.
You know, look how they talk. Look how some people talk about Serena.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
it's like, okay, maybe, you know, they try to, it's like you don't understand it, and none of your people are like that, so you're going to find a fault with it.
Right. Because you can't compete with it in that aspect.
Right.
Exactly. Todd or Dominique, did you guys want to weigh in here?
I was going to say along, and also to what you were saying, instead of being upset with it, celebrate it. I mean, the way that Serena looks, it's just amazing. It's amazing. That's hard work. That's day after day after day after day of hard work. So that's someone that I definitely look up in sports. But kind of back what you were saying, if you were kind of leading in towards the trans issue. And I know when we were all sharing our story, we talked about what sports meant to us and the life skills of what you learn through sport. So if we keep that at the heart of the passion of sport, it's right, as they're changing the needle, it's kind of hard, because if someone's in their transitioning stage, okay, but it's hard to keep them out of sports. I think you said, you know, for your son, you know, it's an outlet. It's an outlet for them because they're already going through a transition period. They're already trying to figure out, who am I? What am I? You know, and for sports, every person that's a trans athlete, they might not make it to the collegiate level or the professional level, but we still need to support them in wanting to play a sport where they're going to learn decision-making skills. They're going to learn with dealing with conflict. They're going to learn all these different stories from their coaches, and they're, you know, all their players and their teammates are going to see them at their high and see them at their low, and they're going to work together as a team to kind of get through it. That's kind of a team perspective, but also think about the mentality that a team sport has versus an individual sport, and what, you know, that grows you holistically, not just within sport. Because I say to a lot of my players is, you know, on a resume or in an interview or a job description, they always say, do you work well in a team environment? That's normally a line in a job description. And, you know, if you working within a team or within a sports team, you can answer yes and give examples of how you dealt with how you dealt with pressure or how you dealt with criticism. So in terms of that, that's just a hard thing to talk about, because I just feel like everybody should have an opportunity for sport, and everybody should have an opportunity of reaping the benefits of participating on a sports team.
Yeah. So we're going to ask questions in a little bit, but I just want to ask this one last thing. So there are, and I used a really bad word earlier for it. I was going to say obscure, but it's not that. But there are sports that are still white dominated, right? And so we can talk lacrosse, we can talk ice hockey, we can talk tennis, right? Even though we've got Serena Williams, we can talk squash. And if none of you have any experience in those, that's okay. But do you see something that connects them Is it lack of availability? They're not as common. I mean, what do you think it is about those sports that have still kind of kept the hands like this at those that are not white individuals?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's economics. I mean, when you look at basketball, I mean, a basketball costs you $12. You look at ice hockey, you're going to pay possibly in the thousands. You got to have a ring to do it in. You got to be in an area that you have a coach that can coach you. I mean, football, I mean, those are the sports that really cost-wise don't cost people really a lot of money. But if you look at tennis, you got to have a tennis lesson. You look at lacrosse, you got to have the equipment to do that, the field to play on that. I mean, so it comes down again to economics. I mean, I think many of the sports that I'll look at when I was growing up, I mean, it was like, go play basketball, football, or track. I mean, it wasn't, hey, go take a lacrosse, don't
Right.
play soccer, go play. I mean, those sports were seen as sports that, predominantly white students participated in. It wasn't something that many Black students participated in. Golf, prime example. I mean,
Yes,
that's a
golf
great
too.
sport where you can play to your doggone 70. But you go into football, I mean, you're going to play probably 5 years at the minimum, maximum. So I just think that it really comes down to having the economics to be able to do the sports that cost you money. Many times, and if families don't have the income to do that, many times in the outlet was basketball, football, or track. They're not as costly.
And I can agree on that. It's the equipment. It's the
Yeah.
equipment that's provided. You think about a lacrosse helmet, you think about an ice hockey helmet, the sports that have a lot of different equipment, shoulder pads, helmet, stick, shin guards, cleats, all of that. That's when you're, and depending on, because I do play field hockey, so I fall into this category. It's kind of keeping up with the Joneses at times because there's always new sticks coming out. There's always new pads coming out. There's always new helmets coming out. And sometimes at the club level, it does cost a lot of money because you have to participate all year round, because then that shows you that you're committed to the sport, but you might not be able to afford to, go to these different tournaments because you can still go to the tournament. You still got to pay for your lodging. You still got to pay for your transportation. You still got to pay the fee to get into the tournament. So I think it's a lot of different factors, but I think the equipment has a lot to do with it because you're growing, obviously. So you're going to have to buy different size equipment year after year after year after year. And then that's very expensive. So.
Do you think that's a problem? Do you think it's a problem that needs to be addressed? That those sports need to be more available?
I think there are some efforts here and there that are trying to take place to introduce the children who can't afford it. My grandson, I got word that there was an African-American medical doctor who had played lacrosse in the Ivy League, who was interested in getting inner city kids involved in lacrosse. And I kind of looked at the person that was telling me that to say exactly what Dominique was saying was that, okay, who's going to pay for this equipment? And he came right on and said, the doctor's willing to pay for all the equipment. He just wants to give these kids an opportunity to play. So my grandson started to play. And we went away to a lacrosse event that was outside. And there must have been like 12 teams. And there was one Black team. There was just one Black team, and the rest of them were everybody in this massive place was white. And, of course, as we walked along as a group, everybody would turn their head and look like, what are they doing here? What are they doing here? But it's the opportunities. And now you're looking at, it's hard to get children involved, inner city children involved in baseball.
Right.
There's
not diamonds like there used to be either. There's not a lot of places to go play.
So yeah, there are some efforts that are going on. It needs to be more because something like lacrosse, that's like made for these little kids. You could slap people with the sticks and
No, only the boys can. There's different rules
Yeah,
for
the girls
girls.
can't, we're not allowed to.
girls
Oh
get
yeah,
different
oh
rules.
really?
Yeah, no.
Oh wow.
Yes, if you watch a
Wow.
girls lacrosse versus my son played lacrosse, and I went to my nieces, and I was like, they're not going, they
I
don't
would,
know each other. What's happening?
No, no.
yeah, man.
Mm.
Yeah. I was one of the kids that I'm working with in inner city. He asked me to come see his lacrosse game. He was in middle school, so I went. I didn't know anything about lacrosse, and I was a basketball referee at the time. So I'm watching him, and this boy gets the ball and he's running with it. He's running, and I'm saying, whoa, that's gotta be a travel. That's gotta be a travel. Look, he hit him with a stick. Call something. He's hitting him with the stick. You better call something. And his parents, they're allowed to do that. So it's a whole different experience.
Funny. And I would just add to that. I think you're right. I think it is about like the exposure to the sports that just kind of needs to be a little bit more prevalent. We've gotten groups like, First Tee of Delaware. When I was the principal up at Howard High School in Wilmington, they approached me. We got a golf team. They paid for all of the equipment. Thank you very much. That golf team is still there to this day. And I'm getting ready to try to hit them up for my current school because I just want to make sure that we're exposing athletes to, different sports that can be out there. But it does help with someone else, footing the bill for it. If you can get someone to donate that money or the upfront piece to it, that's very helpful as well. But I just think, doing the exposure thing is definitely something that can move it forward.
Yeah.
And I think I'm a part of it's called the Black Field Hockey Network. So it's a bunch of, so at the collegiate level, the percentage of African Americans that play field hockey is 2.5%. And other ethnicities, it's 13%. So a part of this network that I'm a part of, it's a lot of Black players that are currently playing field hockey at the collegiate level, club coaches. And we kind of come together and we talk about different issues and different things like that. And I know that I follow a group on Instagram called Blacksers. And I follow a group called the Bronx Lacrosse. So there's a big lacrosse program that's in the Bronx right now that they're trying to build up. So for me, this is very passionate, and this is kind of the give back or the paying it forward. Because I felt like you wrote this question for me because I do play a sport where, there's a lot of, it's a lot of exposure. And I think for the sports that you're also they're also talking about having good examples. When Tiger Woods played, when Tiger Woods started, everybody wanted to go out on the golf and just see what we got,
Right.
Even though I couldn't hit the ball, I just tried to see. And, same with Serena, and there's so many more. So it's great to have examples because even with lacrosse was started by Indians. So it's like, if you want to go back to the root of it, there wasn't a lot of white people playing. It was more Indians because that's how the sport started. Same with field hockey. So it's kind of trying to get back to the roots of the sport and having examples and just having that financial support and having donations and stick drives and helmet drives and, because I think it's something that is on a lot of people's heart because and it goes back to the passion of sport. We want all of our kids to be able to be exposed to everything and not have a barrier of finances. So
Right. And that, that's a lot of things. We're talking sports today, but we're talking music, right? Access to musical instruments and things like that. There is a lot, we talk about disparities in healthcare, but there's also so many disparities in life experiences, I think. And those sports that I mentioned and some others are probably that. I didn't mention golf, I didn't mention tennis, but those are sports that the population is predominantly white or a lot less non-white individuals playing. Larry, I know you were going to say something, or Dr. Edney was. I told people they can put questions in the chat if they have any. Todd, I'm going to there's one in there, and I don't actually know the answer to this, but I'm going to give it to you. Is playing football expensive?
Well, no, it's not, because usually what happens is that if the school or the organization they play for, they usually have the equipment that they sponsor. So You know, I think, I mean, football is a very expensive sport. It is. But I think that most students who go to a public high school, charter high school, private high school, I mean, most of that is funded through your sports program. But so the student doesn't have to pay for it. But football is a costly sport on the back end. I know Dr. Elby knows because you have the insurance costs, you have the stadium costs, you have the maintenance costs. But you know, it's a sport that is really supported though by many organizations too as well. I mean, Nike is a huge supporter of youth football. Like you said, youth football initiatives, and so a lot of school districts get funding for, you know, for football, not to where you could make millions of dollars, but the reality is that, I mean, to suit up and I think it's more expensive to play golf than it is to suit up a football player. Because you have to have the membership to be able to be part of the golfing tournament, plus playing the tournaments and having the golf clubs. I mean, it costs you more to have a golf club than to pay for a helmet nowadays. I mean, so. Football is not as expensive. It is expensive, but for most youth people, most young people, there's maybe a minimum cost that they have to pay. For football, it may be $50, $100, but I mean, it really isn't as expensive as it probably has been in the past because of support from corporate sponsors.
Right, and then you can also just grab a ball as a kid, kind of just, you know what I mean, and play in a field. It's not like you need, you know, an ice rink or anything. There's one more question that we didn't talk about, and I'm going to start this with Larry only because I know his makeup is he is part Indigenous, and so when we talk about team names, okay, and so you know we're talking about no longer do we have the Washington Redskins. Do you think that that's something? Obviously, I shouldn't say obviously. Do you think that something needs to be changed? How important do you think that is? Do you think we're losing something by changing the names of these teams? And is it hurtful? Not that you need to answer all those, but.
I talked to a couple of friends of mine who are natives about this question, and I'd heard similar responses in the past years because I was infuriated about the Washington Redskins, you know, and so. But the responses I would get was like some natives feel it's insulting and some don't. And when I would ask the question, well, why don't they feel it's offensive? And the answers would be in one form or another that racism in America is so prevalent that they just don't, they've gotten used to it. They've gotten used to those kinds of names and so forth. And so they're worn out with trying to fight it. So they just don't care. I mean, that's not everybody. That's not all natives, but a lot of them just don't, they could care less about the Washington Redskins, you know, and some of the others. But this is recently, you know, I saw something that said, America is in love with the Black culture. They just don't like Black people. And so with the natives, I think it's most interesting how what America did to the natives, essentially annihilating them. But you have cities named after Native American. You have all kinds of things that are named after Native Americans. The Braves, okay, you know, they admire what went into. They admire the culture, just didn't like the people, and that's the way America is. America. The racism, you know, in America, it's like, okay, yeah, we like the slogan, we like the songs, we like the Duncan and all that stuff, but we don't really like you, you know. So that's the responses I got about the naming of the sports teams and so forth.
Interesting. Does anybody else have any other opinion or thoughts on the names or any kind of conversations you might have had?
I think you're saying a lot of, you know, school districts take a look at it. I know like in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I'm from, I mean, the Penn Hill School District, I mean, had their name with the Indians, and they looked at changing that to something totally different. So I think that you're having discuss, you're starting to see discussions, not just I think at the national, athletic level, but you're looking at high schools saying, hey, maybe we need to take a look at what the name is now and change it. So I think that it's a discussion that many people are now addressing, just nationwide, not just not just at the national football level or high school level or college level. So,
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, Dr. Edney, is this anything that they talk about in the DIAA? Like, is there any kind of talk about? No.
There has been no discussion that I'm aware of.
Okay. Yeah, I was just interesting is if it would be to that extent, it would be kind of a statewide statement or something along those lines. Because we do have the Washingtons now. My son went to Florida State, so they're the Seminoles still, and they decided to stay the Seminoles. And so some of them are named after tribes, right? And some of them are named. I mean, some of the connotations are negative, and some like there's different aspects to it, right? Some of them are compliments, but it's also co-opting something that's not theirs, right? I think Dominique, you mentioned earlier. Although, were you talking about Indians, like from India? You had mentioned, was it field hockey?
Yeah, but the Native American Indians was more for lacrosse.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying is there's different things that we, as a culture that we absorb from other cultures and kind of say, this is, put our stamp on it. It's ours now.
The other thing, Beck, is that racism in America is America. And racism has been here for so long. You end up putting up with stuff just because you just think there's no other, it's just the way it is, but there has just been, the whole idea that Native Americans, first of all, there's a whole lot of Native Americans that call themselves Indians.
I know.
And so that's just because they've gotten assimilated to the racism that's in America.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yes.
That's all. And so the racism in America, that whole issue hits absolutely every aspect of society, sports included.
Right.
America really thought that Jesse Owens was a great American when he went over to Germany and he got those medals. But when he came home, he was just another Negro, kind of, Right.
So do you think when it comes to sports, we only got a couple minutes left, do you think, one, we're headed in the right direction, and how can we pave the way for equity going forward? Like, are there certain things that we can do as individuals or collectively to make sports more equitable that you see? I mean, not that everybody has the solutions, but
I think I look at sports to this day. I mean, I think things have changed, but it's still there is still this underlining dollar amount that has to be made in college athletics and NFL. And so I think that one of the things I've always said, you look at all the athletes that play professional sports, how many of them own the team? Until you really own the team, you really then don't make those decisions. I don't care how much money you make, because I've always said this to many athletes, if you can pay a 56-man roster of football players and money plus the coaches, how much money are you making? and still have the lifestyle that you need. So I think that, things are moving in a direction, I think, but, the reality is that, and I think even as a community, we have to also say that our kids can do more than just sports. We can own the team. We can be the head coach. You look at right now, the NFL, they still have a disparity of Black coaches. And the Rooney Rule has not changed what has happened in the NFL. So do you see change? Possibly. Are we there? I don't know. I don't think we haven't even arrived to where we need to arrive at. So I think there's still a lot of work to happen, but I do believe that athletes have to be that voice. That has to, we have, you think of all the Black athletes you have, you're telling me that someone can't buy a team? And
Right.
why is that? I mean, if you collectively put your money together between LeBron and Mahomes, I mean, you could buy a team like that. So the question has to be asked is, why have not we been led into that circle of being a
Right. Right. Yeah. I was listening to a podcast that talks specifically about that with the NFL. And there's literally they need to approve you
Yes.
to buy a team. So it doesn't matter if you're Jay-Z and Beyonce and you have the money to buy a team. They have to approve you. They have to let you into their circle. And that kind of blew my mind because I mean, not that it should have, because I think a lot of people sometimes think that money can get rid of any barrier, right?
Yes.
That like it can get rid of any barrier. And here you literally have a sport that's predominantly played by African Americans that makes tons of money, because I know I spend tons of money myself on that gear, and there's not even there might be a legal way in, I don't know, but should there just not be an open arm way in? Like we've gotten this far. It's kind of, if you look at the way our country's been built, right? We've gotten this far on the backs of other people. So do we continue this, and how do we as a community? I think you're right, Todd. I think it's the athletes, but I think sometimes it's the fans too, right? I mean, I thought that if the NFL had handled the Kaepernick situation differently, there could have been a lot more play in that. But like I did mention that Larry boycotted, but there was people on the other side that boycotted as well, because they wouldn't throw people out of the game, and they stopped playing the anthem sometimes just to avoid the controversy. And so there was another side that was boycotting. And so did anybody have any real power? And it's like, how do you get everybody to boycott the bus on the same time and show the power of the dollar, right? The almighty dollar. So
I think progress is made. It's not the same climate as it was when Cullen first protested. It's a different climate. It still could get a lot better. There were coaching positions that were open at the end of this year, and both the teams in the Super Bowl had outstanding coaches that wanted to be head coaches, and neither one of them got
elected.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna close out, but Leslie, to your point, yes, there's a circle. All the owners have to approve any new owner. And I heard it on a podcast. I kind of dropped my jaw, and I didn't do a ton of research on that. So I just really want to thank all of you tonight. This was a great conversation. I think it's the beginning of a conversation, because when this came up in our 21-day equity challenge, I really kind of thought to myself, sports, racism. And then when I started reading all the content, I was like, oh, sports, racism. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, not that I wouldn't think it's everywhere. I do look at most things through a racial equity lens, but I don't spend a lot of time in sports. So that was definitely a learning thing for me. So thank you all so much for tonight. I really, really appreciate you giving YW your time and the people listening your time. And there's lots of thank yous in the chat. And so this is actually going to be on, we'll put it up on our YouTube and on our website, and share the link on Facebook, and I'll send it to you guys privately when we get that, if you want to share it with anyone. And feel free, if anyone has any follow-up questions that they didn't ask tonight, feel free to email me and I'll forward them on to the panelists. So thanks, guys. Have a great rest of your evening.
Take care.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Great job.
Oh, no.
Great job.
Yeah, thanks,
Yes.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.